Today is September 25th, 2024, and we have a very special guest on the show today, Imani Na Umoja. Imani Na Umoja is joining us from Guinea Bissau. He's a member of the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the African Party of Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, PAIGC, serving in the National Secretariat of the PAIGC as the director of the PAIGC Amilcar Cabral Political Ideological Training School. He also serves on the Central Committee of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, A-APRP, and is political secretary for the Central Program Committee and coordinator of the Brothers, Sisters Organization and Allies Task Force. He's on the steering committee of the Black Alliance for Peace U.S. out of Africa Network and a member of the Coordination Council of the West African People's Organization. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, my brother and comrade, for organizing the systematic political coordination and information for our people.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. And today we wanted to talk to you about a critically important topic that unfortunately does not get talked about enough these days, and that is revolutionary Pan-Africanism. So to start off, I wanted to ask you, what is revolutionary Pan-Africanism?
Okay, we talk about, you say it's not talked about enough, but it's becoming more and more talked about as well as practiced. Revolutionary Pan-Africanism comes from the culture of African people, which comes from our history. There's basically two different phases of it. That's what is called the modernly organized aspect of revolutionary Pan-Africanism. And then there's the traditional or historical uh, evolutionary Pan-Africanism. That is to say that if you look at the history of our people, you'll see that of the three aspects that are considered to be the objective of Pan-Africanism, which is the total liberation of Africa, unification of Africa, and scientific socialism, in the modern phase of organized Pan-Africanism, you see that it has its roots in what we were actually involved with in the evolutionary phase, where our people were all the time becoming more and more unified, that our aggregates from the family to the tribe to the clan to the empire were growing larger and larger, and would by evolution would have achieved the unification of Africa. If you look at the aspect of liberation, our people were liberated before we had any type of outside invasions from foreigners. And if you look at the aspect of scientific socialism, you see that it has its roots in what was called, some people call it communalism, and other people call it primitive communism, where there were no classes, where there's no exploitation of anybody by anybody, not by the workers being exploited by the employers. If you look at the modern aspect of it, you'll see that it's mass, that most of the liberation movements that happened in Africa and among African people in the diaspora were based upon those principles and based upon that culture. So it's an objective that calls for the total liberation and unification of Africa with scientific socialism. And when achieved, it will bring about the fulfillment of the aspirations of African people everywhere, and at the same time contribute to the worldwide socialist revolution. Its relevance and importance today is that when we went through the phase of national liberation in the boundaries that were carved up by the imperialists, it was a phase to get to the larger area, the larger objective of uniting Africa. That's to say, for example, in Guinea-Bissau, where I live, it was the Portuguese and the French that really created this state lines between Guinea-Bissau and Senegal, between Guinea-Bissau and Guinea-Conakry. For example, if you look at the northern part of Guinea-Bissau, the boundary that's used right now is a place called, in Guinea-Bissau, it's called Jegi. On the Senegal side, it's called Impact. If you go to that place, Impact or Jegi, it's the same people, the Jola ethnic group. But on this side, they call them Philip. On the other side, they call them Jola, but they speak the same language. When they say hello, Jola, they Kasumai, they respond Kasumai Keb, Katison. They have the same last names. They have even villages that are on that line. At another time in history, about 150 years ago, what is now called Impact, which is on the Senegal side, is a part of a region called Casamas. That region, Casamas, belonged to what we call now Guinea-Bissau. Same people. If you look down in the southern part, the southeastern border between Guinea-Bissau and Guinea-Conakry, a similar thing exists. There's a place they call Cassini on the side of Guinea-Conakry or Guinea-Bissau it used to be connected not only culturally but even politically with what is called the southern western part of Guinea Conakry. Same people that Baga Baga, the Nalus are the same people. But since those were the borders that were imposed upon us, when we took our people, when we had to unify people, to bring the different language groups together, what some people call tribes, we had to say, okay, it's not just your tribe that's most important, it's this nation, it's this national border, this national entity called Guinea. We're Guineans. I might be Fulani, I might be Mandinga or Pepel or Bishogo, but we all belong to this collective called Guineans. So we're Guineans. But we're Africans, as you see, for example, the name of our party, the African Party of Independence. Similar in Guinea Conakry. Okay, we have Malinkis, we have Fulanis, Pearl, we have Bagabagas, but we're all Guineans. We're part of that same nation called Guinea, but we are Africans in Guinea. So its relevance is that it comes to realize that it makes us realize that just by kicking the French out of Guinea Conakry or kicking the Portuguese out of Guinea Bissau is not enough. We got to kick all of the imperialists out of this entity called Africa. We have to make sure that we are to have our full development has to be at the level of the continent, integrated into the world, of course, but it has to be at a continental level, so that we can move freely instead of being trapped like we are right now. Most of the national entities actually have the more direct relationships with entities outside of Africa. Like, for example, a lot of the importation in Guinea Conakry comes from France or other countries, whereas in Guinea Bissau might come from France also, or Portugal or other places. But we need to do more of it among ourselves, more of trading among ourselves, have a common currency, be able to move around freely. So we'll have to do like we do right now. If I want to go to South Africa, for example, I have to go get a visa at the embassy. Whereas in West Africa, we made some progress in the sense that we created a community called the Community of West African States. So that now all of us who are in these 15 countries that are part of the West African community, we all have a passport where we can move freely, supposedly anyway. Sometimes there are those who violate the laws, but I can get on a plane right now and go to Ghana or Nigeria and have to worry about getting a visa, and vice versa. So we need to do the same thing with trade as well as with our transportation. So we need to have our own transportation systems, our own post office, our own telephone systems. To give another example on this one, up until about maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if I want to make a telephone call to Guinea Conakry, our neighbor, I can't do it. But if I want to make a telephone call to a place in Europe or North America or Asia, I had to call the post office here, and that operator will have to put us in contact with another operator in Portugal, and that operator will put us in contact with who we want to call. So our telephone, we have to pay a part of our telephone bill to the Portuguese, and they have to in turn pay a part of that to the place that we call. If I want to write a letter to Guinea Conakry, which I used to do a lot of, I would go to the post office here, and the letter would go to either Senegal or to France, or sometimes go to Senegal and then go to France and then go to Guinea Conakry. But we need to have our direct system where we can write a letter directly to from Guinea Bissau to Guinea Conakry and make direct telephone calls. So the same thing with our trade. So this is just a few examples of its relevance today, as well as the fact that if we fight against the common enemy as Africans, we have more of a strength. We can bring our militaries together. That's been envisioned by people like Amilcar, Cabral, Ahmed Sekou Toure, Kwame Nkrumah, and others. So they'll have more strength. Instead of, and also in terms of our international relations, if you go to, are you in Washington, D.C.?
I'm usually in Atlanta, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Washington D.C. I'm
Okay,
fine.
I know sometimes you're in DC, sometimes in Atlanta. Okay, like for example, in Atlanta or DC, you'll see different consulates and even some embassies in Atlanta. You'll see a whole lot of them in Washington, DC. You'll see an embassy for Guinea Bissau, embassy for Cape Verde, embassy for Senegal, embassy for Guinea Conakry, embassy for all the different 54 of the 55 countries in Africa. What if we need to just have one embassy and have one policy, one international policy, as well as have one curriculum for our schools and learn more about each other? You know, most of us now we still turn on televisions, and particularly the countries that were colonized by the French, and we know more about France than we do about the other countries that are close to us in Africa. So we need to have more Pan-African television. We're learning more about what's going on in Djibouti, what's going on in Zambia, what's going on in Zimbabwe, what's going on in Eritrea. They learn more about what's going on with us, and then also have the same thing to radio stations. And also with the internet connections, as Gaddafi and others pointed out, uh, if you look at the internet connections in Africa, we spend collectively about 6 billion US dollars a year renting space segments to have internet connection. And most of the time it's with internet service providers from France or from the US or from England. And we're just renting, paying rent. But for about 5 billion US dollars and it will own it and control it. This is another example. Same thing with airlines. As Secretary pointed out in his book, The United States of Africa, since we have 55 different countries in Africa, if just each of the countries gave two airlines, we'll have a fleet of 110 airlines. And so we could have those airlines going through all the regions of Africa as well as inside the countries. Like we used to do the first year's independence of Guinea Bissau, we had our own airlines, and you could fly from the capital Bissau to other small cities and even the islands, and it was cheap. We controlled it. But of course, with this constant fight of imperialism against us, most of the airlines in Africa came apart. Even in South Africa, South African Airlines failed. So it's because they tried to do it as a national entity instead of an African entity. So it's a whole lot of relevance to it, more than I mentioned. But they're basic. It's fundamental for us.
No, thank you for that very rich response and answer. And yeah, it definitely seems very relevant and significant. I wanted to move next and ask, what are some of the key principles of revolutionary Pan-Africanism that makes it essential for the complete liberation of African people, both on the continent and in the diaspora?
And some of the main principles of revolutionary Pan Africanism are things that came from our culture again now. For example, how do we view the world? There's some competing philosophies that say that there's an inside and an outside to the universe, whereas the other principles that come from a traditional African side that say that the universe is continuous, which means that if the universe is continuous and it's permanent, then there never really was a beginning, so there'll never really be an end. So don't be such a thing as even if there's an atomic bomb that falls on us or a hydrogen bomb that will just totally be disintegrated. No, we'll continue. The other principles are things like related to unity, that we might have some differences, but we're really the same. Another principle is the principle of how do things really begin? I mean, what makes things move forward? There's two schools of thoughts. There's a school of thought that say that the ideas that a person has in his head makes that it determines reality. Whereas the other thought that says no, reality is reality, and you as a person have to see how can you fit into that reality. And if you want to change reality, we change the reality. Some people call it materialism, and the PAIGC we just call it reality. We say start from the reality. So this is a principle also that comes from revolutionary Pan-Africanism, and the importance of it is that knowing that reality is reality, and we have to, in our heads, try to figure out how do these facts and events of this reality fit into human life so that we can change those. Know the universe so we can change the universe. And things like, for example, materialism makes us understand that everything has movement in it. Even wood has movement in it, the concrete has movement in it. And so everything being material having self motion means that everything changes all the time and that we can transform unconsciousness to consciousness. We can transform negative things to becoming positive things. So the other principles, like for example, that humanism, that human beings are sacred. They should not be used as a means to an end, but rather they should be seen as an end within themselves. And human life has been sacred, so we have to do everything we can to make sure that each human being is treated as a human being and developed to his or her fullest capacity. Then the other principles, for example, of egalitarianism, which says that in essence we're all equal. There's no such thing as a superior human being or inferior human being. Some are taller, some are shorter, some are skinnier, some are fatter, but in essence we're all equal, which means that if anybody else can be a great runner or a great singer or a great musician, we also can do that. That we're not destined to be inferior to anybody else, which has a whole lot to do with our psychological morality, our confidence, our self-esteem, knowing that we have great ancestors that created great things, and we can do like that and even better. And then there's other aspects of, I talked about collectivism there. The collectivism, that we're all a part of the collective, that we should put the general before the particular. That is, say our society is more important than me. But at the same time, we have the future. Some people call it historical reason. So you have the individual reason, the social reason, and the historical reason. So every time I make a decision, I have to think about all three of those. If this decision is good for me, Imani, but it will hurt society, I can even think about making that decision, do that. But if it will help our society, but it will hurt the future generations, then I have to leave that alone. Also, we have to leave that alone. For example, we have a lot of resources in all the countries in Africa. Most countries have minerals as well as petroleum. We might have a foreign country, a foreign company that says, "Okay, I want to buy up the rights to your oil, and I know you all are suffering right now. You need money, so we'll be willing to give $100 million to each citizen that is alive, and even pregnant women will open up a bank account and put $100 million in the bank for the unborn baby." A lot of people say, "Oh, let's take that money and I can invest that money, and it'd be good for my children, my grandchildren." But it'll be incorrect because we have sold away the rights of our children's children, the future generations. So we can't make that decision either. We have to refrain from making that decision because it's good for the society right now, but it'd be bad for our historical, our offspring, historical reasons. This is just some of the principles of revolutionary Pan-Africanism. They're essential for the complete liberation of African people all over the world.
So, how do you address criticisms that Pan Africanism as a concept is too broad or idealistic to address the practical and immediate needs of African nations?
From my perspective, I think that anybody who thinks that they think that Pan Africanism is too, as a concept, is too broad or idealistic, actually are suffering from a little bit of idealism and lack of understanding of culture. What is culture? There are a lot of definitions of it, but if you really look at it, culture is the relation between human beings as a collective and nature as a collective. For example, what is the relationship between societies and with thunderstorms, with floods, with rain, with other positive things like crops to grow, etc.? What's your relationship with it? Then, on the other hand, what's the relationship between human beings and human beings? For example, if human beings collectively have crops, have forests, have oceans or rivers, can a few of those human beings try to take over 90% or 95% of the resources from those rivers, from that ocean, from their forests, at the detriment of the other 95%? If that happens, and if it has happened, that's a struggle that happens between those different classes of human beings. We call it a class struggle. But if you really look at it, what we really want to do is have control over the modes of production, the productive forces on the one hand, and the distribution or the ownership of those products that come from those modes of production. If you look at the aspect of the productive forces, it's the relationship of the earth, the land, that is to say, the instruments to manipulate the land or to exploit the land, and the human beings that control those instruments. The better that the human being becomes more developed and the better the instruments become more developed, the better we can exploit that land for the good of human beings. That's what makes history move forward. And as history moves forward, it produces our culture, which, as we again would say, is the relation between human beings as a whole and and nature, and then the relationship between human beings and human beings. So if you understand that, then you know that Pan Africanism comes from that history and from that culture. Then how can it be too broad? Because everywhere you are in the world, you're trying to resolve those problems, those immediate needs, as well as the long-term needs of Africans wherever they are. So I think anybody who makes a criticism is too broad, I think maybe they're trying to look at Pan-Africanism idealistically. But if you look at Pan-Africanism as it is, pragmatic, a real thing, then you're saying that our people have to be liberated. That's one of the aspects of Pan-Africanism, the total liberation of our people. So for our people to be totally liberated, that means that our people have to control our modes of production. And that's a real thing. Everything we have is this telephone that we're using right now, it's a product. The microphone we're using, the clothes we're wearing, the food that we eat so we can talk, the water that we drink, the different liquids we drink, it's all a product. So you have to have those, but as it is right now, a lot of these products, the mode of production right now is controlled by foreigners or even sometimes those who exploit us on a national level. But to have modes of production, that means that the people have to control these productive forces without any type of international foreign interference or even national interference. So we're in the course of liberating that everywhere we are. So that's practical. That's determines your immediate needs. Why are people hungry? Because we haven't controlled our productive forces. Why are some people dying? They shouldn't die because of diseases that can be cured because we don't control those productive forces. So I would say that those who criticize that they have an incorrect perspective of what Pan Africanism is. They look at it. They look at it as kind of like an abstract movement. It's not. It's concrete, and they actually move forward by actually resolving those problems that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, no, I agree. It's concrete. I didn't mean to cut you off. But yeah, I appreciate that response. Um, yeah, I agree. It's not idealistic or um, impractical at all. Uh, is there anything you wanted to add? I apologize if you weren't done.
Is there anything I want to add?
Yeah, I realized I started, talking before you had completed your response. I just wanted to give you space if there's anything else you wanted to add. And
To that
if
question.
not, I did have another question.
Okay.
Yeah, to the question about, people offering the critique or having doubts about the practicality, um, or how yeah, maybe idealistic Pan-Africanism might be. But no, I think your answer was robust and complete. Just wanted to give you that space. I also wanted to ask, right, as a follow-up question, what do you think, or in what ways does revolutionary Pan-Africanism align with the global struggle for socialism and communism, and how is it the same or how is it different from other socialist movements?
No, Pan Africanism is a part of the worldwide socialist revolution. If you look at socialism at the level of Africa, that's Pan Africanism. So it's really one and the same. There's no difference. The only distinction is there's no difference, but the only distinction is that Pan Africanism is at the level socialism, the level African and of Africa and for African people. But we're not talking about African socialism, scientific socialism. So it's a part of the worldwide socialist revolution. Oh, Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's very strange to me. I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I
can
got
I go
kicked out
straight?
again. I don't know what is going on.
Can
Yeah,
maybe there's a lot of
sorry.
congestion. Maybe a lot of people using StreamYard. So can I go straight to
Maybe
answer the
it
question?
might be. It might be. It might be an issue with StreamYard. Uh, I think so. Yeah, I
Okay.
think you
Uh,
can. Yeah, go right into it.
okay. From our perspective, we don't consider the concept of African diasporans as a correct concept. Africans. Point final. No matter where we are in the world, having a consciousness that we're Africans and belong to the African nation, then we should do any and everything to liberate Mother Africa, to unify Mother Africa, to construct socialism. So, first of all, we must increase our consciousness. That's the first thing. Secondly, we must make sure that we organize with Africans as well as friends of Africa and those that are struggling against imperialism, our enemy, against all forms of exploitation. Zionism, neocolonialism, racism, patriarchy, then against all the evil forces that exist, which means that we must organize everywhere, organize with our people, and organize with the friends of our people. So that means we must become more of a cadre. A cadre is somebody that can reproduce ourselves. It serves like as a center, like a office among ourselves, and reproduce ourselves so we have others who continue to do that work. So they reproduce themselves and we keep on reproducing eternally. So that we have infinite number of people willing to do any and everything necessary to liberate Africa and humanity, all of humanity. So a part of that means that we must give an example. We must study all the time, study our people, study from books, study from experiences of others, all the time study. And then now, those of us who know a little bit more than others should teach those who don't know as much as us. But then at the same time, we should learn from others who know more than us. So that's another part of our culture. Continue to pass on to others that which was passed on to us. So understanding that we're one, that we're African people. We're not diasporan Africans or Africans there, that we're Africans. We're also human beings. So we're Africans as an identity, but human beings as a large identity. We have a culture that comes from our history as Africans, but we also have the universal culture that comes from our experience as human beings. I think that's the most important thing that Africans, no matter where they're born, any part of the world, can do to achieve the objective of Pan Africanism, which, as we mentioned in the earlier question, is part of the worldwide socialist revolution moving toward worldwide communism, where each human being gives according to their ability to give and receives according to their needs. We become real human beings, not robots, not those who existed to just be exploited, to be treated like machines. No, real human beings, sacred. So in a nutshell, that's it.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think your response was profound and it spoke to, my next question around, political education and ideological development and the role that plays in building a Pan-African consciousness that can unite African people worldwide. Given that understanding that you already mentioned that, wherever we are Africans, whether in America or the US or in, the UK or Australia or China, we're Africans wherever we find ourselves. And I think you also kind of spoke to this next question around the significance of cultural revolution in the context of revolutionary Pan Africanism and how reclaiming the African identity and values support the broader revolutionary struggle. But I wanted to, pose or, see if there's anything you wanted to add to that. What is the significance of cultural revolution in the context of revolutionary Pan Africanism?
Yeah, uh, it's essential. There's different types of political education. There's revolutionary political education, and there's counter-revolutionary or anti-human political education. All of us are products of that. It's constantly going on, 24 hours a day. The enemy tries to keep on pumping up into us the ideas that they want us to repeat, so we come to believe them. They try to make us think that the left is really the right and the north is really the south. So our job now is to teach the truth constantly, very constantly, in creative ways, through music, through poetry, through art, through literature, through programs on the television, to news, to everything, every aspect, so that we make our people become more aware of the truth and and even unconsciously, even subconsciously think of the truth, even like by instinct. You know, when we're first born, we have a little bit of consciousness because it's been proven that even when a baby is in the belly of its mother, you begin to have some kind of outside contact with the world. So you begin to, for example, if you're in a war zone, you know, you come out maybe with a little bit of trauma. If you're in a very um, pleasant environment, you come out more pleasant. But one thing is for sure that we, at one time, we didn't have any conscience at all. We just had a brain. And this brain in contact with outside forces, it comes to absorb some of those outside forces and then transform it, or we can say even makes a conversion from that unconsciousness to consciousness. For example, you and I were speaking English language. Why? Because when we were little babies, or even in the belly of our mothers, we heard other people speaking it. And so as we begin to our brain, that material became in contact with the other outside material, which are words of people or gestures by people. We begin to understand things like when somebody was saying thank you, that they were showing appreciation for something. When somebody was saying stop it, stop it, you begin to understand they don't want you to continue doing what you're doing. So begin to make a transformation inside of that brain and begin to develop consciousness uh, of how to understand English, how to speak it, use it as a communication skill. Everything else too, we learned it. So the enemy knows that, and the enemy tries to make sure that they control what we learn, so that we'll believe that what they want us to believe. We believe that their goals are good for us, even if they're bad for us. That, for example, that slavery is a good thing, that colonialism is a good thing, so that to fight against colonialism is a bad thing, to fight against slavery is a bad thing, because it's bad for them because they want to keep on exploiting our labor. So we have to use these any tools that we have available, and even if we don't have them available, we have to find ways to make ourselves available to these tools so that we can uh, transform the unconsciousness to consciousness, and then even go to a higher level of what we call self-consciousness. For example, a baby might not know that a fire will burn, but if that baby touches a candle or a furnace that has fire, and they'll feel that bad heat and instinctively pull their finger back. So they will begin to transform their unconsciousness of what a fire does to become conscious of what a fire does. But a self-conscious person not only knows that the fire will burn, but knows what that person needs to do to put out the fire and won't have to worry about anybody else telling them, go put the fire out. So like what we're talking right now, there might be a fire on the other side of town. We don't know about it. We're not conscious of it. But if we become conscious of it, we might say, oh, I understand there's a fire on the other side of town. But if you can't conscious that, that your baby was in that fire or somebody that you love is in that fire, without anybody telling you things, let me go put that fire out. Let me get that baby out of that fire to bring that baby to safety. So that's an example of being self-conscious. We want to make sure that we ourselves have revolutionary self-consciousness, that we know what are the enemy things and what are the good things for us, what are our interests and what's the enemy's interests, and understand it very clearly and take actions without anybody having to tell us to do it, without any type of outside stimulus. And then at the same time, helping to help bring other people to a level of revolutionary self-consciousness, so that they don't have to wait for us to say, okay, it's time for us to go to meeting. You know, we should make a move against these enemies that are attacking us. You already know you need to do it. That's what we want. We don't want to have a group of sheep where we say, okay, move and they move. No, well, everybody already knows who the enemy is, what the interests of the enemy are, what are our interests, and what we need to do to make sure that we we defend our interests and defeat the interests of our enemy. In terms of cultural revolution, it really means that those positive aspects that came from our history, that produced our culture, that we take the philosophical aspects of them and make them dominate in the current reality. Like, for example, earlier we talked about humanism, that human beings are sacred, that nobody should be exploited. They should be treated as a sacred human being, not used as a means to somebody else, like a slave is used to get money, to make money for the slave master, or like in the modern slavery we call capitalism, the worker is exploited so that the capitalist, the owner of the factory, the owner of the service of society, gets richer and richer and richer, while we who are doing all the work are exploiting, getting poorer and poorer and poorer. We want to make sure that that the sacred values of egalitarianism, that there's no such thing as a superior human being or inferior human being, come to dominate our society. They have to make sure they dominate our consciousness self. So cultural revolution is not just getting for Africans, for example, having an African name or African clothes, making African music. No, it means getting those philosophical values that underline our traditional African society and make sure that they dominate. We transform the current reality so that those philosophies dominate. So there's no longer exploitation of human beings by human beings. We had that golden rule: nobody's born to be exploited. On the other, but on the other hand, that we must help to make each and every human being be able to live to their fullest potential. There's no type of artificial barriers. That when a baby's born, there's no barrier that will stop that baby from becoming a great human being who contributes to society. So, in essence, the cultural revolution means getting rid of all those negative values that have been imposed upon us by our enemies, conscious enemies and unconscious enemies, and making sure that our values, make sure that our values of preserving and protecting nature and human beings come to dominate every aspect of our life, our thinking, and our actions. So in a nutshell, cultural revolution really means getting rid of all the negative aspects that influence our thoughts and our actions, and making sure that going back again down to culture being based upon the modes of production. That our modes of production must be controlled by the people concretely, without any type of domination, foreign or national, so that we can constantly increase the technical values of each human being, so that person can use constantly increase the instruments that will manipulate nature for the good of society. Again, now I'm going back to this telephone we're using right now. It's made of pieces, it's made of materials that come from the earth. The metals they use for it, the metals used for the memory, they come from the earth. How can we better exploit the earth to get the minerals out, but not at the same time not destroying the environment, making sure that the instrument used to put this telephone together don't damage the brain of the human being that uses the telephone, making sure that person who's developing that telephone is all the time increasing the technological and technical skills as well as their social skills in the society. Uh, in a nutshell, everything that we produce, that it be produced by the highest developed mind and consciousness of the human being that's been developed at the same time. In a nutshell. So cultural revolution is it's an ongoing process. It's not an event. It's not like you say, okay, the cultural revolution will begin on the 4th of September and will end at the end of the year. No, it's constantly going on. Revolution continuously, all the time becoming better and better. I'm sorry. You also asked about us
Indeed.
reclaiming African identity. African identity.
Indeed.
If you look at the,
And so,
if you look at identity, identity is there's different aspects of identity. There are the biological aspects, there are the social aspects. So if you look at, for example, the biological aspect, or there's also the geographical aspects. A person was born here, so okay, so that person is from that geographical location, so we identify them with that geographical location. But we also looked at biological, like, okay, this person is the descendant of such and such uh, ethnic group. For example, this person is the grandchildren of the Mandingas or the grandchildren of the Zulus biologically. But if you look at the social aspect, I think that that one dominates the other aspects. How that person is integrated to their society, and how that person now forms his consciousness again. If you look at those three contributing factors to identity, the biological aspect, the geographical aspect, and the sociological aspect, I think we can come to the conclusion, from our perspective, we come to the conclusion that the sociological aspect is the dominant one. And logically, by coming to the conclusion that the sociological aspect is the dominant aspect that contributes to identity, we have to look at what is the underlying factor of the social aspect. It's culture again. So if you look at culture, it's the fruit of a people's history. So if you look at our history, for example, our African identity, if you look at the history of African people, we'll see that it goes back to the roots of our traditional African societies when we're living among ourselves without any type of external invaders. If you look at those aspects that underlie traditional African society, we made reference to earlier, the humanism, the egalitarianism, the collectivism, the Africans are, the human beings are sacred, uh, that the universe is continuous, and no such thing as a beginning, there'll never be an end. You look at those different aspects of our philosophies that underline our traditional African societies, then that cultural aspect becomes to dominate the social aspect, which makes it, which is logically leads us to the conclusion that we're Africans. Even though we may have some differences, for example, you have some differences even in smaller societies. For example, in the city where you live or the village where you live, there are some things that you, even in the family where you live, children of the same mother and father, you might say they have a same biological identity, but really, if you look at biology, there's no two biological entities that are exactly the same. Even twins don't have the exact same DNA, so they have some differences in their biological identity. They might look they might be identical to look just like each other, but they have a difference in their DNA. And if those twins grew up in two different societies, they will have become to have two different consciousness because they if it become integrated in their society. That shows you that the sociological aspect is dominant over the biological aspect. So if you look at the African people, globally speaking, yeah, we have differences, but we also have unity. We have factors. Just like if you take it to a large aspect, to be honest with you, you look at the human family. Okay, we have differences in the types of eyes we have, the colors of skin we have, and other physical aspects. But if different members of the different human family came up in the same society, and they'll be more similar if they're impacted by similar sociological aspects. But of course, now in reality, because we have those different physical aspects, then we tend to be treated a little bit differently. For example, the racist attitudes that exist. If you have an African, a European, an Asian, a Latin American in the same neighborhood in Atlanta, they'll be treated differently by those who dominate that society. But as we come down to have universal culture dominate humanity, those differences will recede. And we'll have more of a human culture identity that will dominate. But in the meantime, we have uh, we have those who are descendants of Asian. They have more of the identity related to the Asian historical philosophies. Those who come from the African descendants have more of influenced by the philosophies underlying the traditional African society, but of course being influenced by some of the negative aspects of slavery and colonialism and neocolonialism and patriarchy. So it's very important that we're conscious of what we want to do. We want to be free. We want to have the most production in the hands of our people without any type of foreign domination or even national domination, so that we use the resources of nature to fulfill the aspirations of human beings in every aspect. That's the most important thing. But given the reality we're living in societies where racism does exist, exploitation of men and women does exist, then we know that those Africans who had that same history of being exploited by slavery and imperialism had to come together to fight against the enemies at the same time struggle to unify.
Absolutely. Struggle to unify. I think that's beautiful. And um, the idea of culture and its centrality in terms of our struggle is helpful to elucidate. So that was a very clarifying answer. Um, Next, I wanted to ask, how does revolutionary Pan-Africanism confront the ongoing neocolonial dominance and economic exploitation of African nations by Western powers? And what are some of the solutions it offers for achieving true economic independence? If you don't mind speaking to that.
Okay, in order for Pan Africanism to be revolutionary, it has to be organized. And the type of organization that is proper for revolutionary Pan Africanism is mass organization. And the best mass organization is the Revolutionary Pan Africanist Party, based upon our people's culture. So, by having the people organized in a serious party, that party, the party's objective is to make sure it takes power over that society, state power, cultural power, economic power, in every aspect. So neocolonialism can only exist when the imperialist powers can control that society. But if the people, when the people are organized in a revolutionary Pan-African mass party, constantly getting political education, they say true education, they don't know how to defend the interests against the intrigues of neocolonialism. Neocolonialism. Neocolonialism works through media, mass media. It works through educational systems. It works through financial institutions. It works through religious institutions, through workers' organizations. Many, just about every aspect that deals with human life, they work there. But the people themselves are now organized to make sure they proactively protect the interests in all those areas: the media, the religion, the social institutions, the financial institutions. Then it will have no way to dominate that society. So it's fundamental that the people be organized in this mass revolutionary party, getting constant education, constantly sharing information, constantly making our own plans to defend our own interests. So not only by Western power, any other power, any imperialist power or exploitative power against the people, won't have a chance against these organized people. As long as the people are properly organized with consciousness, revolutionary consciousness, imperialism will tremble because they know they have the grave is their grave is already digged. The only way they ever exploit is if the people are not organized. That's the only way. The people are not conscious. So in a nutshell, that's it. The people have to be conscious and organized. Imperialism, on the other hand, can only exist when it's able to control a society where the people are not conscious and not organized. That's how they're able to infiltrate the different financial institutions, the media, the educational systems, the organizations for workers, the churches, etc.
Absolutely. Organization is key. So important. So yeah, thank you for that answer. Next, I wanted to ask, how do you view the formation of the AES, or the Alliance of Sahel States, which includes Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger? How do you view that formation in the context of revolutionary Pan-Africanism? And what role do you see this alliance playing in advancing the broader goals of African unity, and resistance to neocolonialism and socialism?
Okay, when we look at the objectives of Pan Africanism, to have a totally liberated Africa, which means to demote the production and hands of African people without any type of foreign or even domestic domination, the liberation. We look at the unification of African people, that is to say, based upon our culture, that our people are all the time using the diversity as an aspect of our unity. We look at the aspect of socialism. Then when we make an analysis of institutions like the Alliance of Hell States, we have to use the reference of the unification of Africa, the liberation of Africa, and scientific socialism. When we see three areas, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, making a military alliance against French imperialism, we have to be happy about that. We're pleased about that. When we see them saying that now they're going to have more coordination among more trade among themselves. We have to be happy about that also. But we still want to see them go further among the path of what revolutionary Pan-Africanism dictates. That's say the organization of the mass of our people. Right now, as it exists, we don't see the mass organization among these three entities. Among this entity called Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. This is what is fundamental for us because no few people, no good intentioned military can organize the mass of people. You have to have a mass party to do that, no matter what name you call it. And that mass party, we say mass party has to have structures for the people in the villages, in the neighborhoods, at their work sites, for the youth, for the women, for the workers, mass. So that way, even if among the few elite, if they start fighting against themselves, you get the mass organized, then the mass will control that society. So we want to see the mass party there doing a constant political education among our people and not just a confederation. A confederation is just like ECOWAS is a confederation, the Economic Community of West African States. You have different entities like the West African Parliament, the West African Court of Justice, the Commission. They've been talking about having a bank. Well, when you talk about an alliance of Sahel states, scientifically, three different states. Okay, let's have a federation, not a confederation. Make it one state like what the Guinea, Ghana, Mali Union was doing during the time of Kwame Nkrumah, Modibo Keita, Secretariat. Secretary, the president of Guinea, Conakry, Kwame Nkrumah, the president of Ghana, Modibo Keita, the president of Mali. They exchanged ministers, so ministers who were in Mali now became ministers in Ghana and Guinea, Conakry, vice versa. They were making their own common curriculum for the schools, and we're making common economic institutions, etc. That's what we want to see happen. So this is what we hope the path that they will follow. They will not just remain as a confederation, but will transform itself into a federation and make sure that collectively they have mass revolutionary Pan-African Party for the people, no matter what they call it. But what is essential and what is fundamental is make sure that you have social political structures at the grassroots so that you and I, our mothers, our neighbors, our in-laws, our nieces and nephews can all be in this organization where we have democracy, where we're able to make proposals when we have our conceptions, our ideas. We take our conception, we make proposals, other people can study this proposal. Everybody has access to the same information and feel free to talk about it, exchange ideas around those proposals without having fear. Without having fear that this person's my boss, he or she might fire me if they don't like what I'm saying, or this person has more power with a gun than me. That person, if he or she don't like what I'm saying, they might put me in jail, or they might kill me, or they might injure me. No, feeling free to talk about it. But once we had the free opportunity to talk about each conception that was presented, either from me or from you, we had the freedom to talk about it and have all the information that's available. Then we make a democratic decision that we're able to implement that democratic decision without anybody abusing us because of any type of other power they have over us. Again, now they're our boss at the job or they have a gun, we don't have a gun. No, we're all equal in that process. We have to make sure we have those structures. And then we also make sure that all the time we share information to increase the revolutionary self-consciousness of everybody who's in the organization. That way, it'll be eternal. It won't depend on a few people. I want to give an example of Burkina Faso. I had the opportunity to be together with Thomas Sankara in 1984. We all praised him. And the works that, he came into power in 1983. He was an honest revolutionary. He tried to transform the military structure that he was in charge of to have what they call committees in defense of the revolution, similar to what happens in Cuba, that the people organize in their villages and their neighborhoods to defend the revolution. But he wasn't able. He only had four. He came into power in 1983, but in 1987, some of the same people that were with him did a coup and killed him. Blaise Compaoré and his group. I mean, they grew up together with Thomas Sankara. They did the coup together with Thomas Sankara. But among that elite, they killed each other. That's a the group of Blaise Compaoré became servants of imperialism and killed Thomas Sankara and another group of revolutionaries to make sure they can install neocolonialism because they didn't achieve the process. They didn't get to the point where they had a mass party in place. But I want to use another example here, Guinea Bissau. Amilcar Cabral and others, they organized a mass revolutionary Pan-Africanist party. And it was that revolutionary party that organized and led a liberation movement where the people themselves had guns. The people themselves were given constant political, revolutionary political education, increasing their cultural level, exchanging information, making decisions democratically. Each of them having the ability to make a concept, have a information about the concept, have free debate among the concept, what we call independence of thought and action, and then make democratic decisions and they themselves implement the decision. Before we were able to proclaim independence, Amilcar Cabral was physically assassinated. But the party continued, and the party continues up to now. He was assassinated 51 years ago, and the party's continuing. It's becoming stronger and stronger because it has structures. It's had its ups and downs, but the reason why it continues to exist is because it has the mass structures based upon the culture of our people. In fact, we say it's our culture in its politically organized manifestation. This is what needs to happen, not only in the Sahel states, but everywhere. So again, now we say that the victories that come from it, we're happy about that. We're happy about the fact that they overthrew a neo-colonial, overthrew neo-colonial puppets in the areas. We're happy by the fact that they kicked out the French troops in Niger and Burkina Faso and Mali. We're happy about that, but it's not enough. Because what do we want? We want the happiness of our people. We want the total liberation of our people, not only in these three areas, but Africa. So if you want to be in the vanguard of the African Revolution, organize the mass of the people. Same thing we said in Libya when Muammar Gaddafi was leading the process of a of creating the African Union. He said he wants to have a federation of African states. They had a federation. They had a conference of African activists for African Federation. Now. And so in our delegation, the presentation we made, we said, if you try to start the level of states, you'll find you'll make a mistake. Because the states themselves cannot organize the people. It's the party that organizes the people. So I gave an example here in Guinea Bissau earlier. It was the party that organized the people that after they liberated zones, they put institutions like schools based upon our culture, put financial institutions, what we call people stores, where we can exchange things. You're growing groundnuts, peanuts, or corn, or tomatoes. You can trade it for me who's making fabrics, and others can trade it for things they're making. It had its own judicial systems at the grassroots level, at the intermediate structure level, all the way up to the central level. It had its own independent international policy. So that by having these state institutions and have people being armed, the popular militia, that when Cabral was physically assassinated, you had these institutions in place so they can keep on organizing. They organized the people to do a census, not only in the liberated zones, but as well as in some of the enemy held zones, and then actually did a voter registration drive in each of these areas, and the people held elections. And the people elected among themselves who would be their representative, what we call a deputy, in the People's National Assembly, the National People's Assembly. So with this National People's Assembly, say, okay, this is the constitution we want for our society, based upon our culture, our interests. And now we will vote on whether or not we want to be independent or not. Okay, who agrees with the proposal for us to become the Republic of Guinea Bissau to be an independent country? All the deputies exist. And who are these deputies? Representatives of the people. So you can kill one or two here and there. You can bring about coups, but the party keeps on. The party's organized around the culture of the people. The party continues. So it's the party that's the guarantee of the revolution. And this is what we need in the alliance of Sahel states. This is what we need any type of experiments you have to say that you're going to kick out the foreigners. Not just like enough to kick out the foreign militaries. And you say you want to create a currency. You haven't done it yet, but even if you create a currency, you have to make sure you have your own bank, your own banking system. And what kind of economic system is this bank going to be based upon? It's only two: capitalism and socialism. So we haven't heard that. We haven't heard the word socialist even mentioned. Do you want to have a social society in this alliance of Sahel states, or you want to be another type of capitalist society? And to organize the social society, again, goes back again to the consciousness. In order to have socialism, you have to have socialists, men and women who are socialists, who are self-consciously give according to their ability to give and receive only to their based upon the necessities to receive. And that's constant political education. And then now with the social society, it's the people who control the party, and the party controls the state. And so the state now, being an instrument of the people, will control all the resources of the people: the waters, the forestries, the minerals underground, the different types of energies like petroleum, etc., and use and now being planned rationally for the good of the society. Okay, we got X amount of resources from the gold, from the uranium, from the fisheries, from the forestry. Okay, now how we're going to use it, how many schools we need to build, how many hospitals we need to build, how many institutions, how many judicial systems, how we're going to build more roads so we can have better exchanges, etc. Better communication systems, better transportation systems so our people can move around. And then how much we need to do that. It's a constant process because the needs of human being is infinite. Some things were considered to be luxuries 30 years ago, now necessities for us. And some of the things we consider to be luxuries now in the future will be necessities for us. So it's a constant process. Again, now the guarantee of this all is the party, the mass party, no matter what you call the party. And that, but that party must make sure it has mass structures that are democratic, so that the people inside of these structures can have the ability to have their conceptions, make their proposals, have debates upon the proposals, have a free democratic discussion of those proposals, make democratic decisions without any type of repression against them or any type of pressure against them, and then the people themselves implement the decisions they made. So that's what power is: conception, decision, execution, consolidation. And where's that power again? It begins at the level of conception, but that's not where it ends. It ends at the level of consolidation, which is that's what we gotta have. It doesn't depend on Imani or Tunde or who those personality figures are in these areas. It's a rule. It's a yeah, it's a rule. It's a law, scientifically.
Yeah, thank you for that. No, absolutely. I definitely agree that that mass party is essential in developing revolutionary Pan-Africanism. So my final question is, and you've spoken to this quite a bit already, but what is your vision for the future of Africa under revolutionary Pan-Africanism, and how do you see the role of African youth in leading the movement toward this future?
And I'm gonna start with the last part of the question first. I'm fortunate that I'm able to be among youth almost all the time. Just before we began this interview, I was just in a long meeting with youth. And I'll be honest with you, I told him at the end, I said, I'm really inspired by this thing we just had to see your level of consciousness, honesty, and dedication. Fortunately, just about everywhere I go, I see the same thing with our youth. The youth becoming more and more self conscious. It's very inspiring. Again, now, if you ask me where it comes from, it comes from our history, comes from our culture. All the time I hear this, you saying, as our ancestors did, as our mothers and fathers, the freedom fighters did, da, 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 da. Keep on making that type of reference. So I think that my perspective, and I'm confident of this, I bet my life on it, that these youth who are organizing will have to build upon the sacrifices of other youth who came before us. Because all these people we even mentioned, they began their struggles as youth. Kwame Nkrumah as a student, Amilcar Cabral as a student, Secretariat as a student. Later was kicked out of school. He became a self-taught student, taking these distant courses. But they were youth. Amilcar Cabral began to organize revolutionary parties in his 20s. But even when he was in his teens, he was the president of Student Association. So when as our youth build upon those victories of those who came before us, it's going to get it to a point where the mass revolutionary parties in different parts of the African world will have more and more coordination to get to the point where they will integrate and have a mass democratic revolutionary Pan-African party at the level of the grassroots, where the people will have that power we talked about earlier, the ability to have their conceptions, decisions, implementation, consolidation based upon the principles of democracy. As a result of that, we will take control of the state at the level of Africa. And so African people throughout the world now will have their true base, where our true history be taught, makes us proud no matter where we are, no matter where we're born and growing up, and have that protection. You do something to an African in Atlanta, Georgia, Africa's going to get you. Yeah. You kill an African there, Okay, so but we're not gonna buy any more of your goods anymore. We even will put a arrest warrant out for you to bring you to Africa to take you to put you on trial, etc. But you're gonna have all these immense resources at the disposition of African people. Just the resources of the Congo, or just the resources of Algeria, is really enough for all African people in the world. But you got 55 different countries in the continent of Africa. You got 26 islands surrounding Africa, and then you got African people that dominate other societies outside of Africa, dominate them. So harnessing those resources will mean that we will have accumulated wealth. We'll have accumulation. We'll have surplus. So every aspect of our lives will be resolved. The educational aspects, the health aspects, the cultural aspects, having our own recording studios to produce, to make sure our music is all over the world, our dance videos all over the world, our dance troops going all over the world, creating our own cars, our own airplanes, our own submarines, our own television station, different television stations broadcasting the reality of Africa, its history and what's going on right now throughout the world. The children having the computers in the nursery schools, having the access to fast internet where they constantly have access to libraries all over the world. I say that the future of Africa with a unified socialist Africa, being able to contribute to world humanity. So when disasters happen in places like Asia or Europe or American islands or any of the islands in the world, we can send our specialists to go help those people. We can bring in students from those different areas to train in African schools, become doctors, engineers, etc. Producing submarines, airplanes, different types of technological devices. You know, right now the Chinese have developed 5G. I can say Africa developing 6G, 7G. It's infinite. But the reality is that it's not far. It's not futuristic. It's not idealistic. That we've already done so much in a short amount of time. Look at where I'm in right now, Guinea Bissau. We're doing it 50 years, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Out of 100% of the people here, 99% were illiterate. But the people organized a party, and as they liberated zones, they put schools there. So they transformed a lot of those who were walking around, didn't know how to read or write or even write their own name. Now became engineers, became doctors, lawyers, teachers, and contribute to society, able to feed themselves and others, as well as contribute to society. If you look at history, W.B. Du Bois used to say that 1,000 years is really not that much time we talk about, in relatively speaking, we talk about history. So 100 years, the average lifespan of the average human being, that's really like almost a snap of a finger and you talk about history. So to see this many changes happen in 50 years, it's very encouraging. And all at the same time, while we've been confronted against all types of sabotage, but still have a lot of people who have the colonial mentality. So we're struggling against that. And those who have the colonial mentality sometimes are more dangerous than the colonials themselves because they look like us, they talk like us. Sometimes they come from the same village as us. Sometimes we even share the same desk in the same classroom. So we've been able to become conscious of how to deal with that. But I see the future of Africa, the near future, being an Africa where Africans are proud. And so Africans, no matter where they're in the world, be proud to be African. And if you even mistake and say, "Are you Chinese?" No, I'm not. I'm African. "Oh, you look like a Frenchman." No, I'm African. Because they're proud of being from Africa. They have more self-esteem, and they have that African base. They could go study in Africa. Even they still going to live in France. But I'm sure that most Africans, as Africa becomes, already got a lot of Africans leaving different parts of the world to come live in Africa, and even non-Africans. Of course, that's one of the reasons why the colonists didn't want to live because we got beautiful climates, we got beautiful landscapes, we got beautiful people, we got beautiful traditions. So I see the near future of Africa being, of course, it has the negative aspects, the struggle that's going on, but it's overwhelmingly positive. African people are beautiful people.
Yeah, I want to apologize to our audience. Looks like I'm having some connection issues. I don't know what's going on with my internet, but really appreciate your responses, comrade and brother Imani Umoja. Um, and really, those were all of the questions I had for you today. But is there anything you want to add or discuss before we close?
Well, there's a lot of things I want to add, but a lot of that will happen as time goes on. But for right now, I want to say thank you for your initiative again. And anybody who's watching this must have already have some type of level of consciousness. I want to challenge us to increase our level of consciousness, a level of revolutionary self-consciousness, by making sure that we develop the instrument of our people better and better. The main instrument of our people. There are different instruments. You got coalitions, you got fronts, you got movements, you got different types of parties. Popular parties, elite parties, vanguard parties, you got revolutionary mass party. From our perspective, the revolutionary mass party is the superior instrument of the people. It's the guarantee of our revolution. We think that's the correct path to go. If you're in a revolutionary mass party, contribute to make it better. Contribute to be an example so that others will come to be a part of that revolutionary mass party. If you're not in a revolutionary mass party, get inside of one. If you look at those from revolutionary mass parties, don't like them, then create one. But I'm sure as we create them, they'll become together anyway. That's another scientific law of our society is that we go from the smaller to the larger. So those of us who don't like the organization that already exists and create other organizations will come together with those later, sooner or later anyway. But instead of being late, let's do it now. Because to have unity, you got to have organization. There's no such thing as unity without organization. Just like the fingers on our hand. If they're disorganized, then we're weak. Even a small child can beat me. But when you organize the fingers, we have a fist. It's unified, more power. That's how our people are. We got to organize based upon our culture. What the philosophies of the organization have to be philosophies that are real, not abstract. Real philosophies that come from our history. And we can contribute to those. If there are deficiencies in the philosophies that we come to detect, okay, we'll improve upon them. That's how culture moves forward. But in a nutshell, we want to thank you and hope that, by being an organization, we're unified. And the difference we have are smaller than in those that the commonalities we have. But even the diversity we have, it's a fact of unity. We want to thank you and wish you all the best of health and happiness.
Thank you so much, my brother and comrade. Again, thank you so much for coming back on the show, and we look forward to having you back soon.
Thank you. We look forward to it, my brother and comrade. We're together, and we're going to win. As they say in Cuba, venceremos. Hasta la victoria siempre. A luta. The struggle continues. Victory is ours. Ready for the revolution.
Ready.
We state these facts only to let you know that those of us who are revolutionary, Pan-Africanists, is not because we love revolution. It is historically determined, and we have no alternative but to follow history and to use history for the benefit of our people.